I'm Michelle Graves, your host on today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm glad to have you here. Now, at The Power of Money, we are interested in three things happening. First, we want you to get the necessary education so that you and your family can make the decisions that will impact positively on you in your financial life. The second thing is that you be empowered to prosper. I only want the best for you. And you can only get that if you have education and then the drive to make it happen. And the third thing that is so important to me is that you recognize that life is more than a journey and that you be energized so that you can begin to participate in the truly joyous experience of living. So, here's to empowerment, here's to education, and here's to energy. I'm Michelle Graves, your host, Power of Money, and here we go. And here we go. It's good to be here today on set at DATV in Dayton, Ohio, where I have been honored and privileged for well over 7 years to be able to air this program on their particular station. But may I also remind those of you who are viewing that to share with your family and friends. We air in 51 other markets, and we are on YouTube. We've been going on YouTube since, I guess, about 6 years ago. And it's been an awesome journey and an awesome experience. And you can always type in The Power of Money with Michelle Graves, and you will not only see this show, but you will see all previous shows. So I want to make you aware of that as we move forward. Now, today's segment is a very powerful segment. You want to take a pause for a minute and really look at this. We're going to be talking about today, for the next hour, surviving Alzheimer. Exactly. The dreaded A word that is officially an epidemic in this country. When I started talking about Alzheimer 5+ years ago, it was just starting to surface as, whoa, wait a minute. And I was very fortunate to have on at that time the executive director of the Miami Valley Alzheimer Association, Mr. Eric Van Vlyman, who is still their executive director. They have expanded significantly in this market. They've expanded significantly all over the United States. People are zeroing in on this issue of Alzheimer. Why? Because, like I said, it's epidemic, and people don't know what to do when it confronts them. What does it look like? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? How's this going to impact on me and my family financially? Is real. And so rather than deal in the arena of supposeds and shared experiences, I felt it would be much more valuable to bring on people who have boots on the ground on this, know what it's like, can help you to maneuver, and it is a maneuvering, by the way, through this. Let me just say this before this conversation begins, and this is very important. If you have a family member that has been diagnosed with that condition based upon testing and evaluation, let me tell you that as things stand today, there is no cure. Please come out of denial. This is major. To watch a person you love become someone else is the most painful experience imaginable. But you must come out of denial. You must get the information. You must be willing to share and to release that sorrow. The blessing is, and it is a blessing, you don't get to see them suffer like cancer or one of those other diseases. This, you get to watch them leave you every day, so you have the opportunity to grab hold of them. You can kiss them, you can love them, and you can cherish that memory when they're gone that you did the best that you could do. So on that note, we're going to get into this today. And again, as I will always say, make notes, get educated, become empowered, and do something. Do something. So today my guests are Rebecca Hall, who is the Director of Care and Support for the Alzheimer Association of Miami Valley. And we also have Charlene Chathams, who is a volunteer with this organization, and her mother had Alzheimer as well. Her mother is now deceased, but prior to coming on air, determined that her aunts also had this dreaded disease. And she's going to share her perspectives and give you some insight on what this looks like and what you need to do. So let me begin by greeting.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Charlene. Where do we want to begin here?
Well, we can begin by talking. You talked about how Alzheimer's is an epidemic.
We can do that.
So
Let's go with it.
I think that's a good place to start, just so people have kind of an understanding of what a big issue this is.
Okay.
So we know that Alzheimer's is one of the most expensive diseases in the country. About 6 million people, over 5 million people are currently living with Alzheimer's in the United States.
Over 5 million people.
Yeah.
That's the number I keep hearing.
Yep.
But the number is growing.
Yes, and it's going to continue to grow, unfortunately, as our population ages. So we know, we've got baby boomers who are getting older.
That's me.
So yeah, so our population is aging, and that means there are a lot of caregivers who, I think almost 16 million caregivers across the country who are caring for people with Alzheimer's. So a lot of people facing it.
Female.
Predominantly female. You're right.
Yeah, predominantly female.
You're right.
So we have a perfect storm from my perspective, which is you've got 5 million people living with this themselves personally. You've got another 15 million people, primarily women, many of whom have trying to do jobs, raise their own families, and then taking care of the parent or parents. In cases I've heard where both parties have it at the same time. And then we have the issue of, given the demographics of this country, more and more people are going to be suffering from this disease. So tell me, what does the future look like?
Well, I think there can be some hope for the future too, because I think there's a lot of research going on right now to try to find better treatment, to try to find a cure. But unfortunately, we're going to see more and more people diagnosed with Alzheimer's and other dementias. So I think we really have to pay attention to this issue and see what we can do to help the people that are currently living with it and who are going to be diagnosed with it.
I understand. Where does it begin? Does it begin with the family observing odd behaviors, or is this something that the medical community gets to and identifies perhaps before the family?
Well, I think a lot of times it probably starts with the family noticing changes, and maybe even the person themselves noticing changes.
What are those changes? Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So some of the symptoms that we see, of course, memory loss, short-term memory loss, confusion, sometimes visual changes, problems with communication, so trouble finding the right words, trouble understanding, trouble figuring out what they're going to say, things like that.
Well, give my viewers a clarification, because we want to be careful with terms. When you say short-term memory loss, what does that mean?
So these are things like forgetting, somebody that's familiar to you, forgetting things that you did yesterday, forgetting how to do familiar things, like use a phone or a microwave or something like that. Those types of short-term memories you know, that are things that happened more recently.
Okay, so it's
and eventually all memories is impacted, but
okay.
a lot of times
it starts
you see
with the short term, the inability to make associations, remember, repetition. I mean, and I might also observe, just from what I see, their eyes begin to change. They look empty. Have you noticed that when you were dealing with your mother?
My mother never got that far to get that look.
Okay.
So,
but your aunts, were they ever?
Yeah, they looked like they were looking through you. Like they didn't really see you. So,
okay. Yeah. Okay. So I would have to say that another indicator to me is just, from what I've seen, the tendency, they could be in a gathering, but they don't look like they're there. They don't look like they're with folks.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe it's because they are confused. And they just be quiet. They don't say anything.
Yeah. Sometimes you see people withdraw in social settings because, you know, they are afraid that they might, you know, not remember somebody, or that they might not be able to communicate with somebody. So a lot of times you'll see, you know, people withdraw, you know, and not be social anymore. And if they are, you know, it's hard for them to be involved sometimes.
But isn't that kind of ironic? They would feel uncomfortable not remembering. That is interesting, don't you think?
Yeah.
If you have a condition that you can't control, how would you feel self-conscious?
Yeah, I think in the early stages of the disease, you know, when you kind of sense that something is going on with you.
Off.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, that's interesting. So when the family observes these kinds of behaviors, what is a typical response?
It's hard to say if there's a typical response, right? Because everyone's so different. But, you know, sometimes, you know, people will be, as you said in the beginning of the show, there might be some denial. Or sometimes people will think it's normal aging. You know,
I've heard that a lot, which is, well, you are getting older, and I'm like, and what does that have to do with that?
Right.
I mean, the presumption is that age means things have changed in the area of processing information.
Yeah, and there is some, you know, cognitive decline as we age, but the symptoms that we talked about, you know, earlier in the show, you know, those are not normal aging. So if you're noticing those types of things, you know, that's something to get checked out. But, you know, sometimes people don't want to get checked out, or sometimes they don't know where to start, or sometimes, you know, they might be in denial, or you know, that type of thing. So it can be a tough to know where to start.
So we're looking at the person who's experiencing this, or the family who needs to take the initiative typically, or does it matter just as long as somebody does?
Well, I think it's important to work together as a team, and the person with who's noticing changes and the family, because they're really going to be dealing with the disease together. So I think, you know, sometimes it's the family member noticing changes and then having a conversation with their loved one, and sometimes it's the person noticing changes in themselves and wanting to talk to their doctor. But a lot of times it's the family who may step up and talk about some of the changes that they're seeing.
Well, I will tell you a situation that I recently experienced where the doctor began, this was a specialist, began asking very specific questions to determine if the ailment was caused by an actual physical problem or the brain. And I'd never sat through something quite that way, where the doctor begins to ask questions of that patient. How old are you? When were you born? Where were you born? What's today's date? And he began going through a series of questions that really I found to be, this is amazing. This is a moment. I need to listen to this. And the person answered some, and some paused and said, well, I have to think about that. They didn't want to say they didn't remember. They just want to say, let me think about that. And the reason after that visit, the reason I got it was because it may be psychosomatic. It may not have been a physical situation at all. It may have been caused by the brain telling you that that hurt. So it wasn't really physical, but it was mental. And I thought about that and I said, now that is a sharp MD, because he wanted to rule out the possibility. So what he did was immediately scheduled them to get diagnostic assistance to determine if there was a physical basis for that person's experience. And I told him, he said to her, I'll never forget, he said, you do know you have dementia. And I wanted to say, why don't you tell her what she has? But he said this gently, and she looked at him and she said, no, I didn't know that. Which was not true, but she didn't ever remember that conversation. But he said, well, you have dementia, and I need to make sure that everything on the physical side is correct. And so the reason I bring that to the table is because I think that doctors also need to be held just as accountable in terms of working with families and referring them for additional help to determine if that's correct. Do you find that happening often?
I think we have some great doctors in our region that are really really noticing, how much we're seeing Alzheimer's, and are referring patients to the Alzheimer's Association and then also to specialists to get a diagnosis. But I do think that it takes more education, even for doctors to understand what Alzheimer's looks like, and how the process, that the family is really going to go through. So I do think it's important that we educate, doctors, everyone in the community, really what to look out for, and what to notice with someone.
I see. So if a individual family member observes behavior that's a little bit different, what are some of the things that need to be addressed immediately, would you say, just for the benefit of my viewers, so they can begin to look at situations a little differently? Well,
early diagnosis is really important for Alzheimer's. We see
early diagnosis.
Early diagnosis.
Now, what does that look like?
So we see a lot of times people who have not talked about changes that they're seeing. We see a lot of times people being diagnosed in the middle stages of Alzheimer's instead of the early stages of Alzheimer's, when I think family can start to plan for what to expect. When treatments tend to, behavioral interventions and things like that tend to work and be more effective. So I think early diagnosis is really important. So I think that what I would say is, for people seeing these changes, to not wait to talk to their doctor, even if they're just talking to their, primary care doctor to start with, just to talk about, what they're seeing. Maybe it's not dementia, maybe it's something else that their loved one is going through, but not to just ignore what they're seeing. So I would suggest having that conversation.
So what was your situation with your mother?
Well, I was very proactive for my mother, I guess kind of bossy.
Okay,
Because
you were bossy. Are you the first child?
Yes.
Oh, wow,
There
those
you go.
alpha females. I
know?
tell you, those alpha females, I'm one.
Okay, but by going to the Alzheimer's Association and getting educated, I knew she needs to go see a neurologist.
You knew that?
Yes, just from being educated, from reading the material that they gave out.
So you had not identified her as having that condition yet? You just went to Alzheimer on your own?
No, when she got tested, she did the test and found out she had the gene. So
Oh, she had it. Well, let's talk about that, because that's important.
she found out she had the gene, and
She has an Alzheimer gene.
What is it called? gene they look for?
There's a gene, it's called ApoE4,
Yeah.
which is
ApoE4.
Yeah.
That sounds like a space.
Yeah.
And she had it.
She had the gene.
So she knew it was coming. But I wanted to make sure she didn't miss anything. So
Okay.
we went to the neurologist and they found things that the general practitioner did not look for. She had TIs that no one knew about.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Right, which have helped her go to that direction.
Yes.
So that way we knew what we needed to do to keep an eye on her, to keep her in a happy place, and to keep us in a happy place.
Was she aware of all of this going on and what it meant?
At the beginning, because she was a nurse.
Oh, she was a nurse.
Yeah, she was on RN. She was
Oh
a retired
my goodness.
nurse.
So she had medical
Right.
practice experience.
And plus the 4 sisters that had
And
it.
her 4 sisters.
Yes.
Any males in your family?
They died too young. To
They
know
died,
if
so
they-
you never knew. But
Right.
there were 4 sisters and now her, which meant all 5
Yep.
had this gene.
Yes. And they all got it.
And they all got it.
Only have one aunt.
What was the name of that
ApoE4 is the gene.
Apo, viewers, give me the camera. Viewers, ApoE4.
E4.
You got Alzheimer in your family, go on and get tested and see if you're carrying the gene. That's my 2 cents on a really tough subject. Okay.
Yeah. I definitely want to just mention about genetic testing.
Okay,
though,
please do.
Because, one thing that we try to, and you probably learned, this, and you've given many presentations, I'm sure you've talked about this with folks too, but we don't typically recommend genetic testing because even if a person has, that gene, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will get Alzheimer's disease. It makes it more likely. Perhaps that they'll get it, but it's something where you'd want to talk to your doctor about it. You have that strong family history,
Right.
so
That's
probably
4 aunts.
That's
strong.
you had that.
But she didn't do it till she was like 71,
Yeah.
72.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
She
So we
waited.
just recommend talking to your doctor about genetic testing if that's something that you're thinking about, and also because genetic counseling is going to need to happen with that because what are you going to do with that information?
Well,
and
you can be prepared at least for, it's kind of like people with breast cancer. If they have that gene, and it doesn't mean they will get breast cancer, but it does mean there it is right in your DNA. And that can at least allow you to do things a little more proactively, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think even if you have that strong family history, you do have a greater likelihood. So
I
even
cannot figure that out. So that genetic predisposition, which manifests with Alzheimer throughout the family, only is relevant if people are living longer. Is that not correct? Or is it? Because if you're in times past, people were dead at 50. You didn't get to see anything because they weren't around. They were gone.
Yeah, you do bring up a good point. So we do see people with, who have early onset Alzheimer's who are
tell me about that.
diagnosed in their, 40s and
40s?
50s. And there does tend to be a genetic component with the early onset Alzheimer's. But for the most part, like you said, people are living longer. And
Yeah, they
age
are.
is the biggest risk factor for dementia.
Right.
So when we see people living into their 80s,
90s.
and older, you're gonna
Centenarians.
you're gonna see more people being diagnosed with it because after 85, they say a third to half of people will be diagnosed with some type of
That's
dementia.
what I was
So
hearing.
it is the biggest risk factor, age.
It's not breaking your hip, although that can happen
Yeah.
as a result of that condition.
Yeah.
But you're right, over 85, and that's a harsh statistic.
Yeah.
That really is. That is a very harsh statistic. So it begins again from, I'm just trying to give a format for where people can go, is the identification. You notice mom or dad doing odd things or repeating themselves and losing things that are never found again. I mean, gone. Like,
Yeah.
what?
That's another
Gone.
symptom. Yeah, you
What?
Yep.
And finding things in odd places. And you observe this as the children. And the first thing I've observed is that family dynamics are now going to change within the family.
Right.
Within, I mean, even before this gets to there, now the positioning and the discussion and the arguments, and it's kind of like a nerve is pushed. Somebody tapped that nerve. And I'm just wondering, has that been your experience, that families go through this angst about what they're going to do now? Because the elephant in the room is here. It's there. You can't hide. It's right there. What has been the typical response from where you stand as a professional?
Well, I think that you're definitely right. Family dynamics is going to come into play for a lot of people. You know, sometimes you get situations where there's one family member who spends a lot of time with that person and they really notice these changes, and then you get somebody who maybe doesn't spend as much time with that person and they think, you know, Mom seems fine, Dad seems fine, you know, I don't notice
I see you
any.
nodding over there. Is that what you experience?
Yes, because people who don't see them every day don't notice the minute changes.
Okay.
They only come visit maybe once every 3 or 4 months. They say, oh, they're okay, they're fine.
And especially because sometimes you see that person on their best behavior when those
When the
relatives come
relatives
in
are there,
and they're like, I'm fine. So yeah, you
and
definitely
okay.
get that dynamic sometimes.
So does somebody, in your case, it was you,
Yeah, I
Charlene.
was there all the time.
You were there all the time, and you saw these things. And were you open in the communication with your mother? Did you tell, you know, like, Mom, you said that 5 minutes
No,
ago? Okay.
you don't challenge them, because that ruins their day and your day.
Oh my goodness!
You learn to do little white lies, and
Tell me about this white lie that keeps popping up when
The
I'm talking
secret.
social workers. You can't tell them the truth.
basically, no, you tell them what they
Because-
need to hear, not what they want to hear.
Okay.
Or if they say something, just say okay. Even if they say it 50 times, just
Okay.
say okay, okay.
Okay.
Because once you trigger them to anger, it stays. It's hard
Really?
to reset them. Oh yes, because I always try to remember that she may not remember what I said, but she
she'll remember
remembers
the
how
feeling.
I made her feel.
Oh,
Yeah,
great, yeah.
yeah. So
That's
that's how I had
that's
to function
good.
every day to remember that. If she said it 100 times, I just had to say,
Okay.
that's right. You're okay. We're
Okay.
going there, because they'll forget that they said it within
but
5
they
minutes.
remember the feeling.
Right. You remember the feeling, and once you set them off,
You're gonna be
miserable all day with them.
miserable all day with them.
Yes, yes. So don't do that.
Ah.
Great
No,
advice.
this is good advice. I mean,
Yeah.
because one of the things that I learned, very close friend of mine, we went through training maybe 5 years ago, dealing with Alzheimer, and they kept saying these little white lies, and I was just like, what? They said, agree with everything.
Yes, made it much
Agree.
better.
It'll make it better for you and them. So if they say hypothetically, in her case, he could not drive anymore. He's a very strong personality, was a captain in the military, used to running things, fought in Korea and all that stuff. Very, very, very strong. And to tell him he could not drive was a problem that I don't think she really ever mastered, but the keys had to go.
Right, right.
So how do you get through something like that?
Well, my mother was unique. She gave up the keys.
Your mother gave up the keys.
She said she never wanted to get lost.
She knew she could get lost.
Right, so she gave up the keys. So someone always took her where she needed to go.
She
So-
gave up the keys before the diagnosis?
No. it
After
was
the diagnosis?
A little while after, she started noticing things herself, and she gave up her keys. And on top of that, she gave up the credit cards.
She gave up her credit card.
So I knew she knew something was wrong.
Something was off.
Right, yes.
You were very, very blessed.
Yes, I was.
Because
I
the
was.
fight for him and that car and other things that he was used to doing that people don't understand if they're not walking that thing out. The one son is real crisp and understands. The other son doesn't live in this area. So he doesn't get to see, although they went to visit him and he got to see.
Okay.
Oh, yes. He thought he was going into the madhouse.
And see, that's another thing, when you move them out of their
comfort zone.
Right. It can trigger them off too. Oh, yeah.
Change in environment, yeah, it can be huge.
So they don't like their environment changed.
It can just cause, it can just cause some issues. You know, you lose that sense of safety and you become more confused, and it can be hard for someone with dementia.
So the ideal scenario, as I'm hearing you, is to be able to keep them in familiar surroundings.
Yes. Yes.
As long as you can.
As long as you can. I mean, sometimes it's not possible, obviously, with the kind of care that someone needs. But I think that's the goal, is to, for as long as possible, to keep someone, safely, if you can do it safely, in their home and in a
What
familiar
if
place.
things happen in their home? What are some of the things that you can do if you're going to leave them in the home? You can't leave them unsupervised, correct?
Correct.
Okay, period.
Depending on what level they're at.
Yeah.
Okay, well, explain. How many levels are there?
Well, so we talk about it in 3 stages. We talk about Alzheimer's in 3 stages, like early or mild, moderate, middle stage, and severe or late stage Alzheimer's. So sometimes in the early stage, the person, they still have some abilities intact. They can still, make decisions for themselves. They can communicate largely, but you're going to notice some changes. But, it's when you get more into those middle and late stages where, I think, you really, caregiving becomes a 24/7 job for someone. So, they're going to need more help, and, whether that's, kind of what you were talking about earlier, bringing, in-home caregivers or whatever that might look like for the person. But, it's going to become where they're going to need a lot more care.
Okay, so in a situation where a person cannot have an independent living environment, and that's because life is just what it is. Sometimes the family is scattered, working, doing what they're doing, and mom or dad or both, they can't watch them. So what happens then?
So I would recommend that person, that family, getting an assessment and finding out what services they might qualify for as far as in-home care, and just figuring out. And I think that this kind of thing is best done earlier in the disease. You got to plan for what what's going to come.
And do you all do those assessments as a part of the Alzheimer Association?
Well, what we can do is we can meet with the family and kind of figure out where they are, help them with any questions they might have related to their symptoms that they're seeing and the situation that their family is in. So we do have social workers that can have what we call family care consultations.
Okay, family care consultations,
with a family, usually with the caregivers. And they can help them develop a plan. They can make referrals to, agencies that can do assessments for different services, like the Area Agency on Aging, for example, other resources that might be helpful, so we can connect them with those. So that's one of the services that the Alzheimer's Association provides for families.
That's very valuable. I would think that would be very valuable. Did you find that helpful in your journey?
Yes, and also there's a lot of veterans don't know there's an aid and attendance program for them to help keep them at home.
I was just talking to a friend of mine that does that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that it's out there. They think, well, I'm not eligible. Try, because a lot of people that thought they were not eligible, they were eligible, and they got to keep their loved ones home a little bit longer because of that help.
So the loved one who has the condition could possibly be eligible for the aid and attendance with the Veterans Administration.
Yes.
That is a phenomenal program.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I got involved with that program maybe a decade ago, and it can make a huge difference for living at home.
Right.
Now, in a facility, that's a different thing altogether. because
yes,
they don't give money out like that, but they can give a sizable amount of money to help.
Right, to help pay someone to stay there when you can't
Exactly.
be there. Yes.
That's what I was thinking. It could help for that independent living decision. Let's talk about caregivers, and I have to say that because you were a caregiver.
Yes, and thanks to Alzheimer's, I'm still here.
Tell me, give me more, give me more.
My father and I, we were going to do it by ourselves.
Okay.
But then I noticed my blood pressure was creeping and creeping and creeping.
Your blood pressure was heading up.
Yes, and I said, we can't do this by ourselves, Daddy. We have to have help.
Now, what was so difficult about taking care of a person who basically isn't real mobile? And
oh, she was mobile.
Oh, she was mobile.
she was very mobile.
Okay.
Because we had to put locks on the door so she couldn't get out. Because she loves outdoors. She was a country girl.
Okay.
So if she got outside, you don't know which way she was going.
Okay.
Because she likes the fresh air and being outdoors. She was a country girl.
Yes.
So, but you know, you watch your loved one go down, it plays on you. And if you don't do anything extra, you're stressing yourself out. So I said, Daddy, we have to make a decision. We either get help or I'm going to have to leave because I can't do it and not keep my blood pressure down.
And so, you knew that was a direct response to the stress of taking care of your mother. Was your dad in reasonably good health for his age?
He's 90. He's 90 now.
He's 90 Probably
now.
Sharp as a tack. And keeps himself in order.
Yes, he does.
Oh my goodness, cooks his own meals and lives his life.
Yeah, but we got the help and my blood pressure started coming back down, so I knew I needed to take care of me also. It's okay to have that little guilt, but take care of yourself also. It keeps you going.
Well, one of the things that I learned was the number of caregivers that wind up dying before the person with that condition.
Yeah, that's why.
Because they just can't take it.
Right.
And they begin to develop conditions.
Right.
From stress. Stress is a killer.
Yes, it is.
I tell people all the time, you better deal with that thing. It'll take you out.
Yes, it will.
So that's very interesting. So you and your dad took care of your mom, who was a very busy lady.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
And doing her thing. At what point did you feel that, or did you? Did she cross over in the home? She never went into a facility.
She crossed over in the home. We were going out to the resource place at St. Leonard's for her to have her weekly, to be around people like her, so she was comfortable. And she just started acting differently. I said, okay, honey, we're going home. Something's changing. I don't want you out here. So we went home, and she was on oxygen. She started turning gray, so I knew it was time. So we called.
Oh my goodness! There was no.
Hers was quick.
Oh.
It was very quick, because it started on Friday and she was gone by Wednesday.
And you knew this.
Yes.
Was she aware that she was leaving?
I kind of think she did. She might not be able to voice it, but I think she knew she was. It was just something. She was getting peaceful looking.
Okay.
Very peaceful looking.
Okay.
So,
which is her time was here.
Yeah. So I knew, because I called the family. I said, it's time. You don't have time to play. It's time to get home. So everybody that could come came. Yeah.
For her crossing over. That's beautiful.
Yeah, they all got there by Sunday.
Really?
And
when did she leave? Wednesday?
She left Wednesday.
So did she recognize everybody when she left?
You know how you have that little spurt before you go? She had that little spurt, and then...
That was it.
Yes.
That's still a beautiful story.
Yeah, so I got to see the last breath.
I would that other people could have that experience, because I hear many times, and you can elaborate on it, Rebecca, but the family members have to put mom or dad in a memory care unit. And let me just make sure, viewers, you understand that in a skilled care facility, we used to call it in the day a nursing home, but it's now 2018. It's now a skilled care facility, and many of them, not all, but many of them have a area for memory loss. It's usually locked down, meaning you can't get in, you can't get out, and it's tightly monitored, because people with Alzheimer get confused and start wandering. And I will also say many of them start wanting to go back home to where they were in their childhood. So that little piece is going to run you between $8,000 and $12,000 a month. Yeah, it's going to cost you, although there are facilities that will do Medicaid. Again, Medicaid is health care for poor people, okay? And it includes a component for long-term care. So if she is eligible for Medicaid and you can find a facility that will accept Medicaid, then you can go on the list. But let's talk about that when a person has to go into a facility because they cannot stay at home because of family or because they deteriorate. Because there's some situations where they just need to be under observation and care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think everyone would like to stay in their home, you know, until the end. But
Yes.
a lot of times, you know, it's not possible when the person needs additional skilled care, you know, depending on what's going on with them. You know, they may need to be in a skilled nursing facility. So, yeah, it can be a really tough decision for families about, you know, when is the right time to, you know, make that decision. And as you said, it's expensive.
Oh my goodness, I don't think most people are aware how expensive it is and why.
And a lot of times if you don't have long-term care insurance and if you don't have, you know, you mentioned how expensive it is every month. If you don't have that kind of savings, a lot of times people have to get on Medicaid in order to pay for long-term care, which is a whole other issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an area that I spent years becoming an expert on Medicaid. Why? Because inevitably, if you live long enough, you're going to go through everything you've got.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are the alternatives? Well, as my viewers will tell you, I have been talking about long-term care for years. Why? Because that's the one insurance you're going to need. If you live long enough, something's going to happen. It's just the body's not like a car. Sometimes parts cannot be fixed or replaced. You have to live with it. So the common concern I have heard over the years is, well, golly Moses, Michelle, it's expensive. And I'm like, but it's not $8,000 a month. Trust me on that. It's expensive. Premiums can be pricey in terms of current dollars, you know, $300 or more a month for coverage depending upon duration. But the reality is, let's look at how it plays out. And that is, interestingly enough, Rebecca, that's the benefit people don't cancel. They never stop paying their premiums. They may cancel other kinds of things, cable. Don't cancel your life insurance, please.
Thank you.
Please don't do that. GoFundMe is not the place to go for your family. You don't want to do that. Okay. No, this is what people, well, I'll do GoFundMe. Excuse me?
Right.
No. So the long-term care thing is a challenge, but I think it's something that has to be a part of the family evaluation. But those kinds of concerns need to be addressed way before diagnosis.
Yeah. That's why I love what you were saying, because this is a conversation that people need to have ideally before you know, they ever get in this kind of situation.
Yes,
you know, we should all have these kinds of plans.
I'm such a strong advocate because the statistics are really harsh, which is the number of people that will be in some form of care and will need the support that a private policy can provide you with. Now, of course, you can always do Medicaid. I tell folks, well, if you didn't get long-term care You're going to spend all your money. Forget trying to play games with moving stuff, because that's fraud. Stop. Your daughter's not getting your house. Not. The government is. Yes. Why? Because you did not plan ahead. And so now who is supposed to pay for mom in the facility? I mean, when you think about that, or dad, whose responsibility is it? Is it the government's responsibility to pay the bill for your parents or grandparents because of their condition, when they could have gone another way and been in an ideal facility? Because private pay facilities are quite nice. Not to say that Medicaid certified facilities are not, but the probability of you having what you want when you're paying for it is just great.
Yeah. I just think planning ahead is so important, because all these decisions are tough. You know, facilities and what's the best facility,
Right.
and how do I figure this out? I mean, we went through this with my husband, and I went through this with a loved one as well. So, you know, it's tough, and these are not, you know, when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to think clearly and make the best decision. When you plan ahead, you can think about these kinds of things, get the input from your loved one, and go from there.
Well, the other thing, and you all can speak to this as probably as well, there's a real misconception that a person that's been diagnosed with Alzheimer has the authority to execute documents. And I say that because I've had conversations with people that have the condition, and they've informed me that this is what they're going to do, and I'm going to, and I said, no, this is back to that nodding your head and saying, okay, because you know me, I'm like, no, you can't, no, that power of attorney, you don't have the authority to execute these instruments.
We talk about early planning. I mean, because in the early stages of Alzheimer's, the person can still make those decisions, and ideally, you would have those powers of attorney set up, you know, ahead of a diagnosis. But yeah, at some point, you know, that's not going to be possible anymore to make those decisions for yourself. So
even if they are lucid enough to see the value, those documents cannot be altered.
Right.
It is what it is.
Yeah, the Alzheimer's Association has a whole class on this legal and financial planning type of stuff.
Oh my goodness,
for people.
that's good. Now, is that a part of the resources that that you can take advantage of?
Yeah, so we
have
have
about your site.
Yeah, we have all kinds of.
Go on and share those.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
well, on our website, you can go to alz.org, and then you can find a lot of information about, you know, all kinds of things, caring for someone with dementia, legal issues, facts about Alzheimer's disease, all kinds of things. But one of the things that the Alzheimer's Association does is we offer education for families, as Charlene was talking about earlier, and it's all free. So we offer in-person classes, online classes.
Do you do online?
Yeah, so people can take our education online, or they can find a class that's happening near them and come and learn from other people in the class. And,
okay, so you have shared experiences as well.
And support groups.
And support groups.
Those are very important to go to.
Tell me what does that look like? What is a support group?
You're going to a support group with other people that are going through what you're going through. And you may be looking at it like this, and they may open it up for you to give you other ideas of how to handle your loved one, the one who doesn't want to give up the driving, the one who doesn't want to take that shower or bath. They give you other perspective on how to get that person to give that up or do. Yes. Where you might have thought of it because you're stressing because you're there every day. And the support groups are free, and they have many in this area.
That is absolutely good information. So they can start with going to the website,
which is alz.org, alz.org/Dayton.
Okay.
And that will
now let me switch for a minute if I get the camera. If you do not have a computer, the public library has computers, an overlooked resource for a lot of people, and it's a busy place. So you can avail yourself of your local public libraries, and they are there with computer accessibility internet friendly so that you can in fact do this. So again, no excuses, no excuses.
One other thing I'll say for those who don't have internet access or a computer or just aren't internet savvy, we have one of our signature services, which is our 24/7 helpline. So it's an 800 number that people can call anytime, day or night, 365 days a year. And someone will help them, you know, connect them with local resources, answer questions, and they can help them find those support groups.
24/7? What is the number?
It's 800-272-3900.
800-272-3900.
Yep.
And that is the helpline.
Yep. Anywhere in the country.
Anywhere in the United States, that number is available
Yep.
for people to get help.
Yes.
That is,
So call. Yeah.
things
You need
have
help.
really advanced.
Yeah.
I'm
People need
so,
it.
yeah, people need it because you don't know what to do.
Right.
I mean, again, families are going through trauma and drama, and I don't know if the person that's experiencing it themselves, if they're going through anything, but it's definitely impactful. And I also say the human brain is phenomenal. It's phenomenal for how it processes information and what happens when things get twisted. Where do you go? How do you do this thing? This has been an awesome encounter. We are getting ready to wrap up. Can you believe it? I told you.
It went fast,
It
right?
went fast. And you all also have a support. You have the support group. They can take advantage of resources from your organization and referral networks.
Yeah.
But again, it's up to the person to take the first step, which is I need help.
Yeah. Or the family that
Or the
needs help,
family.
right?
I need help.
Yep.
And be prepared for the ride of your life.
Yes.
But thank God you've got company.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yep.
Oh, a lot, as you say, a lot of it.
Yeah. Which I think, I want to mention our Walk to End Alzheimer's.
Please
yes.
do. 'Cause
Coming
Tanya,
up,
come on.
we're talking about being in this together on October 6th here in Dayton. And there's Walk to End Alzheimer's across the country.
Yes, okay.
So if people aren't in Dayton, you know, they can go to alz.org/walk and they
Okay.
can find a walk near them. But our Walk to End Alzheimer's in Dayton is October 6th at Fifth Third Field.
Okay.
And
October the 6th?
Yeah.
Is that a Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Free to sign up.
How much? What time's it start?
Oh, you got me on the spot.
That's okay.
I think the opening ceremony starts at 10, but
Okay,
I think check-in starts at 8:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but you can find out all the details on our website.
That is excellent information. Well, I want to thank you,
Yeah. Thank you,
Rebecca,
Thanks.
and I want to thank you, Charlene.
Thank you.
For being a part of my world this past hour about surviving Alzheimer. And I'm sure the information that you shared is going to be utilized by people because this is not going away.
No.
Unfortunately.
This is not going away. And I wish I could say I was hopeful, I remain hopeful, but the brain is so complex. It just is. It's nerve central. It runs everything.
Yeah.
But I thank you all for the work you're doing on behalf of our community and the families of those who are impacted by this really, really difficult disease. And for those of you that are viewing The Power of Money, again, I thank you for being a part of my world for this last hour where we talked about surviving Alzheimer. I know you know people with this condition. I just know you do. Church, family, friends, associates, peers. Please, if you can pass the word on, it'll make such a difference in the quality of the life that these people live. I thank you for being a part of my world, and as always, I send you peace, I send you love, and I send you joy. You take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.